I caught my sister wearing my wedding dress to her own engagement party. I found out while standing in the hallway outside my childhood bedroom, gripping a glass of champagne, watching the familiar ivory silk slip over her shoulders. The dress I had bought for my own wedding, 3 months away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was April, just warm enough for a garden party at my parents' estate in Vermont. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, their pink petals drifting across the lawn like confetti. My mother had insisted on hosting the engagement party for my younger sister, Olivia, though she had only known her fiancé, Marcus, for 6 months. I stood frozen, champagne turning warm in my hand, as Olivia twirled in front of my mother, who was dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "It fits perfectly," my mother said, adjusting the lace at Olivia's shoulder. "With just a few alterations, it will be like it was made for you." They hadn't seen me yet. I was a ghost in my own home, watching my wedding dress, the one I had spent months searching for, the one that made me feel like the most beautiful version of myself, being offered to my sister like a hand-me-down sweater. "What about Ellie's wedding?" my cousin asked, the only one who seemed to remember I existed. "Isn't she wearing this in June?" My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Ellie won't mind. She's always been practical. Besides, her fiancé's company is doing so well. They can afford something even better." My fiancé, Richard, the CEO of the marketing firm where both my sister and I worked. The man who had hired Olivia as his assistant last year when I recommended her. The man who had proposed to me on New Year's Eve with a vintage emerald ring that had belonged to his grandmother. The man who was now, apparently, engaged to my sister as well. I must have made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, the clink of my ring against the champagne flute, because suddenly they all turned. My mother's face fell, not in shame but in irritation, as if I'd interrupted a private conversation. Olivia at least had the decency to look startled, her fingers gripping the ivory fabric like she'd been caught stealing. "Ellie," she said, my name falling from her lips like an afterthought. "We were going to tell you, I didn't wait to hear the rest." I set my champagne down on the hallway table and walked away. Not running, not crying, just walking, one foot in front of the other, down the stairs, through the foyer filled with guests who called my name, past the catering staff arranging appetizers on silver trays, and out into the garden where fairy lights were being strung for the evening celebration. I found my father by the rose garden, talking to Marcus's parents, people I'd never met but who would have been my in-laws in another life. He smiled when he saw me, oblivious to the storm inside me. "There she is," he said cheerfully. "The other bride-to-be. Have you met the Hendersons?" I smiled politely, shook hands, made small talk about the weather and the beautiful grounds. All while my mind replayed the scene upstairs, my dress, my sister, my fiancé. The betrayal so complete it felt like a carefully orchestrated play, where I was the only one who hadn't received the script. It wasn't until my phone buzzed in my pocket that reality truly hit. A text from Richard: "We need to talk. I'm sorry you found out this way." I excused myself and walked to the edge of the property, where an old swing hung from the maple tree my grandfather had planted. I sat down, the familiar creak of the ropes a small comfort in a world suddenly turned upside down. Richard knew. He knew I had discovered their secret. Which meant it wasn't a misunderstanding or a cruel joke. It was real. My sister and my fiancé had been seeing each other behind my back, and now they were engaged. While I was still wearing his ring. I called him. He answered on the first ring. "Ellie," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm so sorry." "For which part?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "For cheating on me with my sister? For proposing to her while still engaged to me? Or for letting me find out by seeing her in my wedding dress?" He sighed, a sound I once found endearing but now felt calculated. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We were going to tell you together, after the party." "How considerate," I said. "Planning my humiliation as a group activity." "It's not like that," he insisted. "Olivia and I, it happened so fast. We didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed, a hollow sound that scattered a pair of birds from the nearby bushes. "Well, mission accomplished on that front. I still care about you, Ellie. You're a brilliant creative director. This doesn't have to affect your position at the company." The company. Of course. Richard was always thinking about the business, about optics, about damage control. I had admired that about him once, his focus, his ambition. Now it just felt cold. Let me get this straight, I said. You want me to keep working for you while you marry my sister? While you plan a wedding with her? While the entire office whispers about how the CEO dumped the creative director for her younger, prettier sister? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You're being dramatic, he said, his voice hardening. This is business. We're all adults here. That word, dramatic. It was what my mother called me when I cried at my grandmother's funeral. What my father said when I got upset about Olivia taking credit for my work. What Richard would say whenever I expressed any emotion he found inconvenient. You're right, I said finally. We are adults. And as an adult, I quit. I hung up before he could respond and turned off my phone. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the lawn. Inside the house, I could hear laughter, music, the cheerful noise of celebration. My sister's engagement party was in full swing, and no one had come looking for me. I sat on that swing until the stars came out, thinking about all the ways my life had been shaped around making room for others. How I had stepped aside, again and again, to let Olivia shine. How I had recommended her for the job at Richard's company, hoping it would help her find her way. How I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the steady one, the one who could be counted on to understand when plans changed. But this time, I couldn't understand. This betrayal was too complete, too carefully constructed. It wasn't a momentary lapse or a mistake, it was a deliberate choice, made by the two people I trusted most, to build their happiness on the ruins of mine. I watched the party from a distance, seeing the silhouettes of guests through the windows. At some point, my mother stepped onto the patio, looking around, presumably for me. I stayed in the shadows, unwilling to be found. She eventually went back inside, and I felt a strange relief in my invisibility. By midnight, I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't create a scene or demand explanations. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I would disappear. Not forever, not dramatically, but long enough to rebuild myself away from their expectations and assumptions. I slipped back into the house when most of the guests had left. The cleaning crew was already at work, clearing away champagne flutes and dessert plates. No one noticed as I climbed the back stairs to my room, packed a small suitcase, and took the emerald ring from my finger, placing it on my dresser beside a photo of Richard and me from better days. I wrote a short note. I know about you and Olivia. The dress is hers now. So are you. I was halfway down the driveway when my phone buzzed again. I had turned it back on briefly to order a rideshare. It was a text from Olivia. Where are you? We need to talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I shut off my phone completely and slipped it into my bag. The car arrived minutes later, headlights cutting through the darkness. The driver helped me with my suitcase, asked where I was headed. The airport, I said. I have a plane to catch. I didn't actually have a ticket yet, but I would. As soon as I was far enough away from this house, from this night, from the people who had decided I was dispensable. The next morning, I was on a flight to Barcelona. I had always wanted to visit Spain, had talked about it with Richard, who preferred vacations in the Hamptons or Aspen, places where he could network while relaxing. Spain had been my dream, not his, and now it would be my refuge. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. Not my best friend, Zoe, who had been sending increasingly worried texts. Not my assistant at work, who probably wondered why I hadn't shown up on Monday. Not even my father, the only family member who might actually be concerned about my disappearance. Instead, I posted a single photo to my Instagram as the plane took off, the view from my window, clouds and sunrise, no caption. Let them wonder. Let them worry. For once, I wasn't going to make it easier for anyone. Barcelona greeted me with warm sunshine and the scent of salt air. I had booked a small apartment in the Gothic Quarter, a third-floor walk-up with a tiny balcony overlooking a bustling plaza. It wasn't luxurious like the hotels Richard would have chosen, but it was authentic and private, and mine alone. For the first 3 days, I didn't check social media or my email. I wandered the city, getting lost in narrow streets and finding my way again. I ate at small cafes, practiced my rusty Spanish, and sketched in a notebook I'd bought at a local shop. I was a ghost, but a solid one, taking up space in a place where no one knew my name or my story. On the 4th day, I finally looked at my phone. There were 37 missed calls, 112 text messages, and countless social media notifications. Most were from Olivia and my mother, a few from Richard, and several from Zoe and other friends. My father had called once and left a voicemail that simply said, "I hope you're okay, sweetheart. Call when you're ready." I didn't call. I wasn't ready. Instead, I scrolled through the messages, reading the evolution of their concern and, in some cases, their anger. From Olivia, "Ellie, please call me. We need to talk." Then, "This isn't fair. You're not giving us a chance to explain." And finally, "Mom is worried sick. At least let us know you're alive." From my mother, Eleanor Grace Mitchell, "This behavior is completely unacceptable. Come home at once." Then, "Your sister is devastated. This was not how things were supposed to happen." And later, "Your father is considering calling the police. Is that what you want?" From Richard, "This is childish, Ellie. We need to discuss this like adults." Then, "I'm concerned about you. Please respond." And finally, "I've accepted your resignation. Your personal items from the office have been sent to your apartment." I read them all with a strange detachment, as if they were messages meant for someone else. The old Ellie would have responded immediately, would have apologized for worrying them, would have rushed home to smooth things over. But I wasn't that person anymore. Instead, I posted another photo to Instagram, my hand holding a cup of Spanish coffee, the beautiful mosaic tiles of the cafe floor in the background. No caption, no location tag. Just proof of life, on my terms. The responses were immediate. My phone buzzed with notifications, with direct messages, with texts. They had seen it. They knew I was alive. But they still didn't know where I was or when I was coming back. My mother called within minutes of the post. I let it go to voicemail. "Eleanor," she said, her voice clipped and controlled. "This has gone on long enough. Whatever issues you have with your sister can be resolved, but not like this. Not by running away like a child. The family is embarrassed. Your absence from the office has raised questions. Come home, and we'll sort this out." Embarrassed. Of course. My mother's primary concern had always been appearances. What would people think? How would this reflect on the family? Never mind that my fiancé and my sister had betrayed me in the most painful way possible. The real problem was that I had reacted to it in a way that caused inconvenience. I deleted the voicemail and ordered another coffee. The sun was warm on my face, the plaza buzzing with life around me. For the first time in days, I smiled. Not because I was happy, exactly, but because I was free. Free from expectations, free from the constant pressure to be the understanding one, the reasonable one, the one who made things easier for everyone else. A week into my self-imposed exile, Zoe finally tracked me down. Not physically, she respected my boundaries too much for that, but she figured out I was in Spain from the architecture in the background of my photos and the specific type of pastry I had posted the day before. "Nice detective work," I texted her. "I'm your best friend," she replied. "I know your pastry preferences. Are you okay?" I considered the question. Was I okay? Not really. I was hurt, angry, betrayed. But I was also breathing, eating, sleeping. I was walking through beautiful streets and discovering new parts of myself with each passing day. "I'm getting there," I wrote back. "Just needed some space." "From the backstabbing sister and the cheating fiancé?" she asked. "Or from everyone?" "Both," I admitted. "How bad is it back home?" Zoe didn't sugarcoat it. Olivia and Richard had made their engagement official. My mother was handling damage control, telling people I was on a work assignment abroad. The office was buzzing with gossip. My replacement had already been hired. "They're acting like you're the villain in this story," Zoe wrote. "It's messed up." It was messed up. But it was also exactly what I had expected. In their version of events, I was the one who had behaved badly, not by cheating or betraying, but by refusing to accept their betrayal with grace and understanding. "Are you coming back?" Zoe asked. I looked around my small apartment, at the sketches I had pinned to the wall, at the books I had bought from a local shop, at the fresh flowers I placed on the table each morning. In just a week, I had created a life here, small and temporary. But mine. "Not yet," I replied. "I need more time." 2 weeks turned into 3, then a month. I extended the lease on my apartment, found a local co-working space where I could use my design skills for freelance projects, and established a routine that felt both foreign and familiar. Each morning, I walked to a nearby cafe for breakfast, then spent hours either working or exploring. Each evening, I sat on my tiny balcony and watched the city transform as the sun set, turning ancient stones golden, then purple, then blue. I posted photos occasionally, never of my face, never with a location tag, but enough to let people know I was still alive, still moving through the world. Each post triggered a new wave of messages, increasingly desperate from my family, increasingly angry from Richard, increasingly concerned from friends who didn't understand what was happening. The only person I responded to was my father, who had started sending short texts that asked for nothing. Saw a dog today that reminded me of your childhood pet. Your mother made your favorite cake. I had 2 slices. The maple tree is dropping seeds everywhere. Remember how you used to call them helicopters? To him, I sent equally simple replies. I'm safe. The food here is amazing. I'm learning to draw. Never revealing where I was, but letting him know I was okay. 6 weeks after I left, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line was simple, I know what they did. It was from Marcus's sister, Jade. Someone I had never met but who had apparently been at the engagement party that night. I saw you leave, she wrote. I saw how they looked when they realized you knew. I've wanted to reach out, but no one would give me your contact information. I found your work email online. I thought you should know that Olivia and Richard have been seeing each other for almost a year, not the 6 months everyone believes. And Marcus, my brother, knew about it. He knew Richard was engaged to you and introduced him to Olivia anyway. I'm sorry. You deserved better. A year. Not a whirlwind romance, not a sudden connection, but a year-long deception. While I was planning our wedding, while I was helping Olivia with her career, while I was building a life I thought included both of them, they had been lying to me, laughing at me, planning to replace me. I printed the email at the co-working space and brought it back to my apartment. I read it again and again, each time feeling a different emotion surge through me: rage, grief, vindication, exhaustion. By evening, I had made another decision. I posted a new photo to Instagram, the email, with identifying information blurred out, and a caption: for the first time, the truth always finds its way to the surface. The response was immediate and chaotic. My phone exploded with notifications. Olivia called 7 times in a row. My mother left 3 voicemails, each more frantic than the last. Richard sent a long email that began with threats of legal action for defamation and ended with a plea for me to be reasonable. I turned off my phone and went for a long walk along the beach, watching the Mediterranean glitter under the moonlight. When I returned home, I turned my phone back on just long enough to check for messages from my father or Zoe. There were several, but the one that caught my eye was from an unknown number. This is Marcus, Jade's brother. I didn't know about you and Richard until after I proposed to Olivia. By then, they had convinced me you were the problem. I'm sorry I believed them. But I'm not marrying her now. Thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to process what it meant. Marcus had broken off his engagement with Olivia. After my post, after the truth came out, he had walked away. Part of me felt a surge of satisfaction, finally, a consequence for their actions. But another part felt hollow. This wasn't what I had wanted. I hadn't left to punish them or to destroy their relationship. I had left to save myself. The next morning, there was a text from my father: your mother and sister are flying to Spain tomorrow. They found your location from your credit card statements. I thought you should know. My heart raced. They were coming here, to my sanctuary, to my space. To demand explanations, to extract forgiveness, to drag me back into their narrative. I wasn't ready. I might never be ready. I packed my suitcase again, left the rent paid through the end of the month, and took a train to Madrid. From there, I could go anywhere: Portugal, France, Italy. I could keep running, keep hiding, keep avoiding the confrontation that was inevitably coming. But as the train pulled away from the station, I realized I was tired of running. Not because I wanted to face them, but because I was done organizing my life around their expectations and demands. I had built something here, something small but meaningful, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. I got off at the next stop and caught a train back to Barcelona. When I arrived, I didn't go back to my apartment. Instead, I checked into a hotel near the beach, one my mother would never think to look for me: too modest, too local, too far from the luxury brands and Michelin stars she preferred. From my hotel room, I sent a text to my father, tell them I'll meet them tomorrow. Café Olivia on La Rambla. Noon. Then I turned off my phone again and spent the evening sitting on the hotel balcony, watching the waves and preparing myself for what was to come. Not with speeches or accusations, but with the quiet certainty that I was no longer the person they had left behind. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table at the back where I could see the entrance. I ordered a coffee and waited, my heart surprisingly steady. At exactly noon, they walked in, my mother in her designer sunglasses and linen dress, Olivia behind her, looking smaller somehow, her usual confidence dimmed. They spotted me immediately. My mother's face shifted from anxious to relieved, to composed in the span of seconds. Olivia's eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup carefully applied to hide the evidence of tears. They made their way to my table, turning heads as they passed, two beautiful, well-dressed American women, out of place in this local cafe. Eleanor, my mother said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. Thank God. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. The careful makeup, the rigid posture, the way she glanced around to see if anyone was watching. Always performing. Always aware of the audience. Olivia sat down more hesitantly, her eyes fixed on the table. Ellie, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry. Are you? I asked, the first words I had spoken to either of them in almost 2 months. Sorry that you did it, or sorry that people found out? My mother's back stiffened. Eleanor, this attitude is not helpful. We've come all this way to bring you home, to sort this out as a family. To bring me home, I repeated. Like I'm a runaway teenager, not a grown woman who made a choice to leave after finding out my sister and my fiancé had been lying to me for a year. Olivia flinched. It wasn't like that, she said. We didn't plan it. It just happened. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that made both of them jump. Things don't just happen for a year, Olivia. That's called a choice. A series of choices, actually. Every day, every time you saw him, every time you looked me in the eye and lied. My mother reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled away. Sweetheart, we understand you're hurt. But this public display, these posts, the email you shared, it's affecting the family. People are talking. Marcus has called off the engagement. Richard's company is facing questions from clients. It has to stop. Of course. The real problem wasn't what they had done to me. It was how my response was affecting them. Their reputations. Their relationships. Their carefully constructed narratives. So that's why you're here, I said. Not because you were worried about me. Not because you wanted to apologize. But because I'm making things difficult for you. That's not fair, Olivia protested. Tears welling in her eyes. I've been sick with worry. I've called, I've texted. I just wanted to know you were okay. I'm better than okay, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I'm living my life for myself. Not as your sister, not as Richard's fiancé, not as the daughter who always does what's expected. Just as me. My mother's face hardened. And who exactly is that, Eleanor? A woman who runs away from her problems? Who hides in a foreign country rather than facing reality? Who shares private family matters on social media for attention? No, I said, my voice steady. A woman who refuses to accept betrayal as her due. A woman who values herself enough to walk away from people who don't. A woman who is building a life that belongs to her, not to anyone else's expectations. Olivia was crying openly now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I love you. You're my sister. And yet, I said, you wore my wedding dress to your engagement party. To celebrate your relationship with my fiancé. While I was in the same house. My mother made an impatient sound. The dress was hardly the issue, the dress was exactly the issue, I interrupted. It was the perfect symbol of everything that happened. You took something that was mine, something I had chosen with care and love, and you gave it to Olivia without a second thought. Because that's what always happens. Whatever I have, whatever I build, whatever I love, it becomes hers whenever she decides she wants it. That's not true, Olivia protested. Isn't it? My childhood bedroom became your art studio. My prom date became your boyfriend. My college acceptance became a competition you had to win. My career path became your sudden passion. And finally, my fiancé became your fiancé. Tell me, what part of that isn't true? The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. My mother looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Olivia stared at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. I'm not coming home, I said finally. Not now, maybe not ever. I found work here. I found peace. I found a version of myself I didn't know existed, one who doesn't shrink to make room for others. But the family, my mother began. The family will survive without me, I said. You always have. I stood up, leaving enough money on the table to cover my coffee and theirs. I'm not posting anything else about what happened. Not because I owe you privacy, but because I'm not interested in living in that story anymore. I've started a new one. Olivia looked up, her face tear-streaked and vulnerable. Will you ever forgive me? I considered the question, feeling the weight of it, the expectation behind it. They wanted forgiveness, not to heal me, but to heal themselves. To close the chapter and move on, to restore the balance where I understood and accepted and made things easier. I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about me. For once, that's enough. I left them there, walking out of the cafe into the bright Spanish sunshine. I didn't look back to see if they were following. I didn't check my phone to see if they were calling. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, down the street toward the sea, toward the future I was building for myself, word by word, day by day. That evening, as the sun set over Barcelona, I sat on the beach and watched the waves roll in and out, in and out, a constant rhythm that had nothing to do with human drama or family expectations. I took out my phone and posted one last photo, the sunset, the sea, my shadow stretched long across the sand. The caption was simple, home is where you build it. Then I turned off my notifications, put my phone away, and walked back to my apartment, the one my mother and sister would never find, because they had left on the evening flight, empty-handed. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The space was small but filled with things. I had chosen books, sketches, flowers, a life taking shape around me. For the first time since that night in April, I felt something like peace. Not because I had won or because they had lost, but because I had finally understood a truth that had eluded me for years. Some betrayals can't be fixed with apologies or explanations. Some broken things are meant to stay broken, making space for something entirely new to grow in their place. After that final meeting with my mother and sister, I expected to feel relief. Instead, a strange emptiness settled over me. Not regret exactly, but a hollow space where anger had been. I spent the next few days wandering Barcelona's streets, trying to outpace this new feeling. The Gothic quarter, once magical, now felt like a maze I couldn't escape. I kept seeing my sister's tear-stained face, hearing my mother's cold assessment. A woman who runs away from her problems. Was that who I had become? No. I refused to accept that narrative. I hadn't run away. I had chosen myself. There's a difference between escape and self-preservation. I just needed to remember that. On my 5th night alone since their visit, I sat at a small tapas bar, picking at patatas bravas and watching a group of friends at a nearby table. They were laughing, sharing food, telling stories with animated gestures. Something about their easy camaraderie made my chest ache. For all my brave talk about building a new life, I had spent the past 2 months in relative isolation. Independence had become loneliness without my noticing the transition. The bartender refilled my wine glass and nodded toward the group. They come every Wednesday, he said in accented English. Writing group. Always looking for new members. I'm not a writer, I said automatically. He shrugged. Everyone has a story. I finished my wine, paid my bill, and left without speaking to the group. But the next day, I found myself walking past the same bar, slowing down to peek inside. The writing group wasn't there, of course, it wasn't Wednesday, but the bartender spotted me and waved. Embarrassed, I waved back and hurried away. That night, I received a text from Zoe, haven't heard from you in days. Still alive? I realized I had been neglecting the one person who had stood by me through everything. I called her immediately. Finally, she answered. I was about to file a missing persons report. Sorry, I said. Things have been complicated. Your mom and sister showed up, right? Your dad told me they were planning to retrieve you. I could hear the air quotes in her voice. They tried. It didn't work. Good, Zoe said firmly. You don't owe them anything. I sighed, looking out at the Barcelona night. Maybe. But I'm starting to wonder if I'm just hiding here. Are you happy? Zoe asked. Sometimes, I said honestly. I love the city. I'm doing interesting freelance work. I've learned how to order coffee without embarrassing myself. But I'm lonely, I admitted. And I'm not sure if I'm moving forward or just standing still in a prettier location. Zoe was quiet for a moment. So make connections. Join something. Talk to people who aren't tourists or baristas. Like what? I don't know, a class? A club? One of those expat groups? Something that puts you in a room with potential friends. After we hung up, I sat on my tiny balcony watching the street below. A woman was closing her flower shop, bringing in the last buckets of blooms. An old man walked his tiny dog along the cobblestones. A couple argued, then kissed, then walked away hand in hand. All these lives intersecting, connecting, continuing. And there I was, above it all, separate, watching. When Wednesday came around again, I found myself back at the Tapas bar. The writing group was there, 7 people around a large table covered with notebooks, laptops, and half-empty wine glasses. I ordered a drink at the bar and tried not to stare. The bartender placed my wine in front of me with a knowing smile. Just go say hello, he said. They don't bite. I told you, I'm not a writer. And I told you, everyone has a story. He gestured to my sketchbook, which I'd been carrying everywhere lately. You create things. That's enough. I stayed at the bar for another 20 minutes, working up my courage. Finally, as the group was ordering another round, I approached their table. Excuse me, I said, my voice shakier than I intended. The bartender mentioned you're a writing group. I'm not a writer, but I'm new to Barcelona, and I trailed off, suddenly feeling foolish. A woman with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes smiled up at me. You're looking to meet people who aren't tourists, she guessed with a British accent. I nodded, relieved. Pull up a chair, she said, moving her bag. I'm Emma. This motley crew is from all over, England, Germany, Canada, even a few actual Spaniards. They introduced themselves one by one. Emma, the retired professor from London. Gabriel, the Spanish graduate student. Lucia, the Italian chef. Thomas, the German architect. Sophie, the French artist. Michael, the American journalist. And Marina, a local novelist. I'm Ellie, I said. From Vermont. I'm a designer. What brings you to Barcelona? Thomas asked. I hesitated. The real answer was complicated, messy, still raw. I needed a change, I said finally. Marina raised her glass. Don't we all? Welcome to the Expatriates and Runaways Club. They didn't press for details, instead pulling me into their conversation about a story Gabriel was working on. They debated character motivations and plot holes with good-natured intensity. I mostly listened, occasionally offering an opinion when asked. By the end of the evening, I had agreed to come back the next week and bring some of my sketches to share. Walking home that night, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. They were strangers, yes, but strangers who had made room for me without demanding my history or justifications. It was a small thing, an evening of conversation, but it felt like a door opening. The next morning, I woke to a text from Richard. The office misses you. I miss you. Let's talk about you coming back. Clean slate. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but something stopped me. Not nostalgia or forgiveness, but curiosity. What made him think, after everything, that I would consider returning? What version of me existed in his mind that would say yes to this? I saved the message but didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began searching for design firms. In Barcelona. If I was going to stay, and I realized with sudden clarity that I wanted to, I needed more than freelance work. I needed to build something sustainable. 3 interviews and 2 weeks later, I was hired by a small but growing design agency specializing in sustainable brands. The office was a converted warehouse near the beach, with high ceilings, exposed brick, and a team of 15 designers from across Europe. My Spanish was still rudimentary, but most of the team spoke English, and they were patient with my attempts to learn. For the first time since I'd left Vermont, I had a routine that felt purposeful. Mornings at the design studio, afternoons exploring different neighborhoods or sketching in cafes, Wednesday evenings with the writing group. I started taking Spanish classes twice a week and joined a weekend hiking club that explored the hills surrounding the city. Slowly, I began to feel less like a visitor and more like someone building a life. I found favorite bakeries and grocery stores. I learned which streets to avoid during tourist season and which hidden plazas offered the best people watching. I bought plants for my apartment balcony and got to know my neighbors. But even as I settled into Barcelona, echoes from home continued to reach me. My father sent regular updates, neutral, loving messages that never pushed for my return but kept the door open. Zoe visited for a long weekend, bringing news of mutual friends and old colleagues but carefully avoiding mentions of Olivia or Richard. And my mother sent formal emails that read like press releases, updates on family events, carefully edited to present everyone in the best possible light. Reading between the lines, I learned that Olivia and Richard were still together, but had postponed any wedding plans. My mother never mentioned our conversation in Barcelona, acting as if her failed retrieval mission had never happened. I responded to my father and Zoe but left my mother's emails unanswered. It wasn't punishment, exactly. I just didn't know what to say to a woman who could witness her daughter's pain and see only an inconvenience to the family image. 3 months after settling in Barcelona, I received an unexpected email from Marcus, Olivia's ex-fiancé. "I hope this isn't crossing a line," he wrote, "but I wanted to thank you. Your Instagram post saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I've moved to Seattle, started fresh. I hope you're doing the same, wherever you are." I stared at the message for a long time before responding, "Not crossing a line. I'm glad you found your way out. I'm building something new too." We exchanged a few more emails over the next weeks, careful, friendly messages about new jobs and new cities. There was something freeing about talking to someone who understood exactly what I had escaped but wasn't entangled in my family dynamics. He had been collateral damage in the same explosion that had sent me flying across the ocean. "Do you think you'll ever go back?" he asked in one message. "To Vermont? For visits, maybe," I replied. "To my old life? Never. Not even to get closure?" he pressed. Closure. Such a neat concept for such a messy reality. Was there really a conversation, an apology, a moment of reckoning that could tie everything up with a bow? I doubted it. "I think sometimes closure is something you give yourself," I wrote back. "Not something you get from others." As summer turned to fall, Barcelona's oppressive heat gave way to golden afternoons and cool evenings. The tourists thinned out, and the city revealed a different rhythm, slower, more deliberate, belonging to the people who actually lived there. I found myself among them, no longer just passing through. On a crisp October morning, I was sketching in my favorite cafe when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Eleanor Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Patricia Alvarez from Rivera Design House in Madrid. Your portfolio was recommended to us by Marina Sanchez." Marina, the novelist from my writing group. We had become friends over the past months, but I had no idea she had connections in the design world. "We're launching a new lifestyle brand focusing on sustainable luxury," Patricia continued. "We need a creative director who understands both American and European markets. Would you be interested in discussing the position?" The job was everything I had dreamed of but never quite reached in my previous career: creative control, ethical focus, international scope. The salary was generous, the team impressive. There was just one catch: it was in Madrid, not Barcelona. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course," Patricia said. "We're interviewing candidates next week. Let me know if you'd like to be among them." I called Marina immediately after hanging up. "Did you recommend me to Rivera Design House?" She laughed. "I showed your portfolio to my cousin who works there. The rest was all you, Querida. Your work is exceptional." "It's in Madrid," I said. "Madrid is beautiful," she replied. "Different from Barcelona, but beautiful. I just started feeling settled here." Marina's voice softened. "Ellie, when you joined our group, you were running from something. Now you have the chance to run towards something. That's progress, no?" That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the city gold. I had come to love this view, this apartment, this neighborhood. I had favorite cafes and grocery stores. I knew which bakery made the best croissants and which street vendor sold the freshest flowers. I had begun to build connections: the writing group, my coworkers, my Spanish teacher. The thought of starting over again in a new city made my stomach knot. But wasn't that the point of all this? Not to hide in one safe harbor but to discover what I was capable of. Not to build walls but to open doors? I called Patricia back and scheduled an interview for the following Tuesday. The weekend before my Madrid interview, I received another email from Richard. Unlike his previous messages, which had been alternately pleading and businesslike, this one was different, raw, almost desperate. I know I've lost the right to ask anything of you, he wrote. But I need to talk to you. Not about us. That ship has sailed, and I understand why. But about the company. Things are falling apart here. Clients are leaving. The creative team is rudderless. I made a terrible mistake, professionally and personally, and I'm trying to fix at least one of those things. Please, just a phone call. My first instinct was to delete it. His problems were no longer my concern. But something in his tone gave me pause. This wasn't the confident, controlling Richard the first knew. This was someone drowning. I thought about what Marina had said, the difference between running from something and running toward something. Maybe part of moving forward was facing what I had left behind, not to return to it but to truly leave it behind. I responded with a single line, I'll call tomorrow at 2 p.m. your time. The next day, sitting in a park far from my apartment if physical distance could provide emotional protection, I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. Ellie, he breathed. Thank you for calling. I'm not coming back, I said immediately. Not to the company, not to Vermont, not to any part of my old life. I know, he said, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. That's not why I reached out. Then why did you? He sighed. Because I owe you the truth. The whole truth. Not the edited version your family has been telling. I'm listening, I said, though part of me wondered if any truth he offered could matter anymore. Olivia and I. He began, then stopped. This isn't easy to admit, but she wasn't the first. There were others, over the years. Not serious, not like with her, but I've never been faithful. Not to you, not to anyone. The words should have hurt, should have reopened wounds barely healed. Instead, I felt a strange, calm clarity. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know it wasn't about you, he said. It wasn't that you weren't enough or that she was somehow better. It was my failing, my brokenness. And Olivia? Does she know about your brokenness? He was quiet for a moment. She does now. That's partly why I'm calling. Everything's imploding, Ellie. The engagement is off. Half the creative team has resigned. 2 major clients have pulled their accounts. I thought I could control the narrative, but I can't. And you want me to do what, exactly? Come back and fix your mess? Absolve you? Tell everyone it's not as bad as it looks? No, he said, surprising me. I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not the damage control version. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, with the person who should have protected you most. I used your talent and your trust to build my success, then discarded you when it suited me. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm not. I needed you to hear it from me, finally. The truth. I sat with his words, feeling them settle into the spaces where anger had lived. Not healing the wounds, exactly, but acknowledging them without excuses or deflections. Thank you for that, I said finally. But you're right, I can't forgive you. Not now, maybe not ever. What you and Olivia did didn't just break my heart. It broke my trust in both of you, in my family, in my own judgment. I'm rebuilding my life now, and neither of you are part of it. I understand, he said. For what it's worth, I think you're better off without me. I think everyone probably is. There was a defeat in his voice that might once have triggered my caretaking instincts. The desire to reassure, to fix, to make things easier for everyone else. But that version of me had been left behind in Vermont, along with the wedding dress and the emerald ring. That's for you to figure out, I said. Your redemption isn't my responsibility. After we hung up, I sat in the park for a long time, watching children play and couples stroll and old men play chess. Richard's confession had shifted something in me, not toward forgiveness, but toward a cleaner kind of anger. Not the burning rage of betrayal, but the cool certainty of knowing I had escaped something toxic. My phone buzzed with a text from my father, just checking in. Hope you're well. For the first time, I sent him more than a brief reassurance. I told him about the job interview in Madrid, about my writing group, about the small life I was building. I didn't mention Richard's call, but I did ask how he was doing, really doing, not the sanitized version. His response came quickly, proud of you, Ellie Bear. Always have been. Things at home are Complicated. Your mother misses you but won't say it. Olivia and Richard are finished. She's staying with us again. I'm thinking of retiring next year. Maybe visiting Spain. I smiled at the old nickname he hadn't used since I was a child. Ellie Bear. The daughter he had taught to fish and change tires and stand up for herself. The daughter who had somehow gotten lost in being the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who made things easier for everyone else. I'd like that, I wrote back. The visiting Spain part. There's a lot I want to show you. Tuesday morning, I took the high-speed train to Madrid for my interview. The city was different from Barcelona, more formal, more stately, less Mediterranean. The Rivera Design House offices occupied the top floor of a renovated palace near the Prado Museum, all soaring ceilings and modernist furniture against centuries-old architecture. Patricia greeted me warmly, introducing me to the team and showing me around before the formal interview began. By the time we sat down in the conference room, I had already fallen in love with the space, the projects, the energy. The interview lasted 3 hours, a deep dive into my portfolio, my approach, my vision for their new brand. I presented concepts, fielded questions, engaged in the kind of creative dialogue I had missed in my months of freelancing. When it was over, Patricia walked me to the elevator. You've given us a lot to think about, she said. We'll be in touch by the end of the week. I nodded, suddenly exhausted but exhilarated. Thank you for the opportunity. Before you go, she said, holding the elevator door. Can I ask you something personal? I tensed slightly but nodded. Why Spain? Of all the places you could have gone, why here? I considered deflecting, giving the polished answer I had prepared for such questions. But something about her direct gaze made me opt for honesty. I needed to be somewhere I had never been with anyone else, I said. Somewhere without memories. Or expectations. Somewhere I could discover who I am when I'm not defined by my relationships to other people. Patricia nodded slowly. And have you? Discovered that person? I smiled. I'm working on it. Good, she said. That's the kind of creative director we need. Someone who understands transformation. As the elevator doors closed, I realized I had just shared more of my story with a potential employer than I had with most of the people I'd met in Spain. And instead of making me feel vulnerable, it had felt like strength, the ability to own my narrative without shame or apology. Back in Barcelona that evening, I told the writing group about the interview over tapas and wine. They celebrated with me, offering advice about Madrid neighborhoods and promises to visit if I moved. Emma, who had become something of a mentor to me, raised her glass in a toast. To new chapters, she said. And to the brave souls who write them for themselves. Later, walking home under a sky scattered with stars, I felt a sense of possibility. I hadn't experienced since before that fateful April day. Not the possibility of returning to what was lost, but of creating something entirely new, a life that wasn't defined by what I was running from, but by what I was running toward. My phone buzzed with a notification. An email from Patricia. We'd like to offer you the position. Can you start next month? I stopped in the middle of the street, staring at the screen. 6 months ago, I had fled Vermont with no plan beyond escape. Now I was being offered the chance to rebuild not just my life but my career, on my terms, in a place of my choosing. I looked up at the Barcelona night, at the city that had sheltered me when I was broken, that had given me space to heal and grow. I would miss it, the Gothic quarter, my tiny apartment, the writing group, the familiar cafes. But perhaps that was the point of this journey, not to find another place to hide, but to keep moving forward, step by step, choice by choice, building a life that belonged entirely to me. Yes, I typed back. I can start next month. As I pressed send, I felt something settle inside me, not closure, exactly, but its quieter cousin, acceptance. Acceptance that some things couldn't be fixed or forgiven. Acceptance that new beginnings often required difficult endings. Acceptance that the life I was building might be smaller in some ways than the one I had left behind, but it was mine, shaped by my choices, my values, my vision. And for now, that was enough. Madrid greeted me with brilliant autumn sunshine and the particular elegance of a city comfortable in its own history. Unlike Barcelona's seaside charm, Madrid wore its importance with quiet confidence, grand boulevards, majestic buildings, parks that felt like royal gardens because they once were. My new apartment was in Malesana, a neighborhood known for its vibrant nightlife and artistic community. It was larger than my Barcelona flat, with high ceilings, wooden floors, and tall windows that filled the space with light. The building, dated from the 1920s, with an ornate facade and a tiny elevator that creaked reassuringly as it carried me to the fourth floor. I spent my first weekend unpacking and exploring my new surroundings, finding the closest grocery store, the best local cafe, the quickest route to the metro. I sent photos to my writing group in Barcelona, who responded with a mix of congratulations and good-natured complaints about my betrayal in moving to Madrid, their friendly rival city. Emma texted, "Remember, darling, you can always come back. If those madrileños are too stuffy for you." I smiled, grateful for the connections I had made, the safety net they provided even as I moved forward. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined having friends in Spain, let alone the kind who teased me about intercity rivalries. My first day at Rivera Design House was a whirlwind of introductions, orientations, and creative briefings. The team was smaller than my old firm in Vermont but more focused: 5 designers, 2 copywriters, a brand strategist, and Patricia, whose title was creative director but who would be transitioning that role to me over the next 3 months. "We want to revolutionize how luxury and sustainability intersect," she explained as she showed me the mood boards for their flagship client, a high-end clothing brand committed to ethical production. Not just greenwashing, but authentic transformation of the industry. I nodded, already seeing possibilities, connections, approaches we could take. "I have some ideas about that," I said, surprising myself with my confidence. Patricia smiled. "That's why we hired you." By the end of my first week, I had settled into a routine: early mornings at a cafe near my apartment, working days at the design house, evenings exploring Madrid or video chatting with my Barcelona friends. I had also begun looking for a local writing group or something similar, wanting to build the same kind of community I had found before. It was strange how quickly the rhythm of a new place could begin to feel normal. The streets that had seemed like a confusing maze on day 1 were becoming familiar paths by day 7. The faces at my local cafe were beginning to recognize me, greeting me with nods or smiles. The apartment was starting to feel like mine, not just a space I was borrowing. On Sunday morning, my phone rang with a Vermont number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Ellie? It's Jade, Marcus's sister." I sat down on my couch, surprised. "Hi, Jade. How did you get my number?" "From Marcus," she said. "I hope that's okay. I'm not calling about all that." "Well, not directly. What's going on?" I asked, curiosity overcoming caution. "I'm in Madrid," she said. "For work. A fashion photography assignment. I remembered you mentioned moving here in one of your emails to Marcus, and I thought maybe we could meet for coffee? If that's not too weird?" It was weird, objectively speaking. This woman was the sister of my sister's ex-fiancé, a connection so tenuous it barely existed. And yet, she had been the one to tell me the truth when everyone else was lying. In a strange way, I owed her. "Not too weird," I said. "Coffee sounds good." We met that afternoon at a cafe near Retiro Park. Jade was taller than I expected, with the same warm brown eyes as her brother but with a creative edge to her style that marked her as an artist. She waved when she spotted me, then gave me an awkward half-hug. "This is surreal," she said as we sat down. "I feel like I know you, but we've never actually met." "I know what you mean," I replied. "Thank you, by the way, for that email, months ago. It changed everything for me." She nodded, stirring her coffee. "I couldn't stand watching it happen. The way they were all pretending everything was fine, like you were just some inconvenient detail they could erase. It wasn't right." "How's Marcus doing?" I asked. "Good, actually. Better than I expected. He's dating someone new, a doctor. He met in Seattle. She seems kind, genuine. No red flags so far." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. "And what about you? You're a photographer?" Jade lit up, talking about her work with fashion brands, her focus on sustainable and ethical companies, her dreams of publishing a book of portraits celebrating diverse beauty. I found myself responding with equal enthusiasm, sharing my new role at Rivera and our similar mission. "Wait," she said, halfway through her second coffee. "Rivera Design House? I'm shooting for one of their clients next week, Luisa Torres's new collection." I laughed at the coincidence. "That's my project. I'm leading the rebranding." "Small world," Jade said, shaking her head. "Or maybe not so small." The sustainable fashion community is pretty tight-knit, especially in Europe. We spent the next hour comparing notes on the project, sharing ideas, finding unexpected synergies between our approaches. By the time we parted ways, we had not only planned to collaborate on the photo shoot but had also made tentative plans for dinner later in the week. Walking home through Retiro Park, I marveled at the strange paths life could take. Here I was in Madrid, building a professional connection with someone whose only link to me was through betrayal and pain. Yet that very connection might lead to something creatively fulfilling for both of us. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of humor, and perhaps a sense of justice as well. My collaboration with Jade turned out to be just the beginning. Her photographic style, raw, authentic, emotionally resonant, perfectly complemented the brand direction I was developing for Luisa Torres's collection. Our work together drew attention not just from Patricia and the client but from the wider fashion community in Madrid. "This is exactly what we hoped for when we hired you," Patricia told me after our presentation to Luisa. "This fresh perspective, this authenticity. You're not just creating pretty designs, you're telling stories that matter." I blushed at the praise but recognized the truth in it. For the first time in my career, I wasn't holding back, wasn't second-guessing my instincts, wasn't worrying about fitting into someone else's vision. I was creating from a place of genuine conviction, and people were responding. Jade and I continued our unexpected friendship, meeting for coffee or wine after work, introducing each other to our respective circles. Through her, I met other creatives in Madrid, photographers, stylists, art directors, people who moved between the worlds of commerce and art with the same fluidity I aspired to. One evening in late November, as we shared tapas at a tiny bar near my apartment, Jade asked the question I had been expecting since our first meeting. "Have you heard from your sister lately?" I set down my glass carefully. "No. Not directly. My father mentions her sometimes in his messages, but that's it." "And Richard?" "He called once, a few months ago. To apologize, supposedly. I haven't heard from him since." Jade nodded slowly. "Marcus told me they broke up. Richard and Olivia." "I know," I said. "My father mentioned it." "Does it help?" she asked. "Knowing they didn't end up together after all?" I considered the question, trying to access feelings I had carefully packed away. "Not really," I said finally. "It was never about wanting them to be unhappy. It was about me needing to be free of that whole situation, the betrayal, yes, but also the patterns. The family dynamics where I was always expected to understand, to forgive, to make things easier for everyone else." Jade raised her glass. "To breaking patterns, then." "To breaking patterns," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. Later that night, lying in bed listening to the sounds of Madrid outside my window, I thought about patterns, the ones we inherit, the ones we create, the ones we struggle to break. For 30 years, I had been the responsible daughter, the supportive sister, the accommodating partner. I had built my identity around being reliable, understanding, forgiving. Now, thousands of miles from home, I was becoming someone different, someone who prioritized her own dreams, who set boundaries, who didn't automatically smooth things over when they got uncomfortable. It wasn't always easy. The old patterns called to me sometimes, the familiar pull of putting others first, of making myself smaller to make room for everyone else. But each day in Madrid, each project at Rivera, each new connection I formed on my own terms strengthened my resolve to continue this transformation. As winter settled over Madrid, bringing crisp, cold days and early sunsets, my work at Rivera intensified. We were preparing for a major fashion event in February, where Luisa Torres would debut her new collection alongside our complete rebranding. The pressure was immense but exhilarating, exactly the kind of creative challenge I had always thrived on but rarely been given in my previous role. I worked long hours, often staying at the office until well after dark, fueled by espresso and the particular energy that comes from creating something you truly believe in. On weekends, I explored Madrid's museums and galleries, filling my creative well, finding inspiration in everything from Goya's dark visions to contemporary installations in tiny galleries tucked away in lavapiés. December brought Christmas. Lights strung across Madrid's streets and a festive atmosphere that was both familiar and foreign. Shop windows displayed elaborate nativity scenes alongside fashion displays. Street vendors sold roasted chestnuts and turrones, the traditional Spanish nougat. It was my first Christmas away from home, and though I told myself I was fine, a melancholy settled over me as the holiday approached. Not homesickness exactly, I couldn't imagine returning to Vermont, but a quiet grief for traditions lost, for the family I had once believed in. My father called on Christmas Eve, his voice warm across the miles. "Merry Christmas, Ellie Bear." "Merry Christmas, Dad," I said, curled up on my couch with a glass of Spanish wine. "How are things there?" "Cold," he said. "We got 8 inches of snow yesterday. Your mother's making her usual feast, though there are fewer of us this year." I waited, wondering if he would elaborate. "Olivia's here," he continued after a moment. "She's struggling." The whole Richard situation hit her hard. Harder than any of us expected. I stayed silent, unsure what response he was looking for. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad," he added quickly. "Or to ask you to do anything. I miss you, Ellie. We all do, in our different ways." "I miss you too, Dad," I said, surprised to find it was true. But not the rest of it. Not the dynamics, the expectations, the roles we were all stuck in. "I understand," he said, and I thought maybe he did. "More than you might think. I've been doing some reflecting of my own these past months." We talked for another hour, about my work, about his garden plans for spring, about a trip he was considering to Spain in the new year. He didn't pressure me to return, didn't ask me to call my mother or sister, didn't try to repair what was broken. He just met me where I was, and for that, I was profoundly grateful. After we hung up, I wrapped myself in a blanket and went out onto my small balcony. The street below was quiet, most people already gathered with family for their Christmas Eve celebrations. Across the way, I could see into the windows of other apartments, families around tables, couples decorating trees, solo dwellers like me creating their own private rituals. I didn't feel alone, exactly. I felt independent, autonomous, the architect of my own experience. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was real in a way my previous life had not been. My phone buzzed with a text from Jade. "Orphan Christmas dinner tomorrow at my place? I'm collecting all the strays who aren't going home for the holidays." I smiled, typing back, "Count me in. I'll bring wine." The new year arrived with fireworks over Madrid and a sense of possibility that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. This would be my first full year in Spain, my first year fully embracing this new identity I was creating for myself. January brought a surge of work as we finalized everything for the February fashion event. Days blurred into nights, concepts transformed into tangible assets, the abstract vision becoming concrete reality. I was exhausted but fulfilled, pushing myself creatively in ways I never had before. It was during this intense period that I received an unexpected email from Olivia. The subject line was simple: "I understand now." I stared at it for a long time before opening it, my heart racing with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. What could she possibly understand after all this time? "Ellie," she had written. "I know I have no right to contact you. I know I burned that bridge in ways that might be irreparable. But I need to tell you that I understand now what I did to you. Not just the betrayal with Richard, which was unforgivable on its own, but the pattern, the lifelong pattern of taking what was yours, of eclipsing you, of expecting you to step aside and smile while I took center stage." I read on, my hand shaking slightly. "Richard and I were a disaster. I see that now. We brought out the worst in each other, his controlling nature, my need for validation. When it ended, I was devastated, but not because I loved him. Because I had sacrificed everything, including you, the one person who always loved me unconditionally, for someone who never really saw me at all." She continued, describing therapy sessions, hard realizations, the slow and painful process of facing her own patterns. It wasn't a request for forgiveness or a plea for reconciliation. It was simply an acknowledgement of the harm done, of the lessons learned, of the growth still needed. "I don't expect you to respond," she concluded. "I just needed you to know that your absence forced me to look at myself in ways I never had before. You're building a beautiful life there. Dad shows me the photos you send him. I hope someday I can build something equally authentic for myself." I closed the email without responding, not out of anger but because I needed time to process it. The Olivia I knew had never been capable of this kind of self-reflection, this ownership of her actions. Was this growth real, or just another performance? I brought the question to my weekly video call with the Barcelona writing group, who had become my trusted sounding board even from a distance. People can change, Emma said thoughtfully after I explained the situation. The question is whether that changes anything for you. What do you mean? I asked. Her growth is her journey, Emma explained. Your healing is yours. They don't necessarily intersect, even if her change is genuine. I nodded slowly, understanding. So I don't owe her a response? You don't owe anyone anything, Marina chimed in. That's the lesson you've been learning all along, isn't it? Your life is yours. Your choices are yours. Your forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be yours to give when and if you're ready. Their words stayed with me in the following days. As I threw myself back into work, grateful for the distraction of the approaching fashion event. I didn't respond to Olivia's email, but I didn't delete it either. It sat in my inbox, a door neither open nor closed, a possibility I wasn't ready to explore but wasn't rejecting outright. February arrived with unseasonably warm weather and the frenetic energy of Madrid Fashion Week. The Rivera team worked around the clock, finalizing every detail of Luisa Torres's presentation. Jade and I collaborated closely, ensuring that the photography and design elements told a cohesive story about sustainable luxury and authentic beauty. The night of the event, I stood backstage at the converted warehouse space we had transformed, watching as models were fitted in Luisa's remarkable creations, garments made from innovative sustainable materials that looked as luxurious as any traditional fabrics. The walls displayed Jade's striking photographs alongside my design elements, creating an immersive experience that told the story of the brand's evolution. Patricia appeared at my side, elegant in a black jumpsuit, her silver hair swept into a sleek updo. Nervous? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. But in a good way. She smiled, squeezing my arm. This is your moment, Ellie. You've earned it. As the event began and guests filled the space, I moved through the crowd, explaining concepts, answering questions, accepting compliments with a grace that still felt new to me. Fashion journalists took notes, influencers captured images for their platforms, buyers from major retailers expressed interest in Luisa's collection. It was, by any measure, a triumph, not just for the brand but for me personally. This project represented everything I had become in the months since fleeing Vermont, bold, authentic, unapologetic in my creative vision. Near the end of the evening, as I was speaking with a journalist from a major fashion magazine, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Jade, her camera hanging around her neck, her expression urgent. There's someone here to see you, she said quietly. Who? I asked, scanning the crowded room. Your father. My heart seemed to stop, then restart at double speed. My father? Here? Now? Jade nodded, gesturing toward the entrance. He said he didn't want to interrupt your big night, but he's been planning this trip for months. He arrived in Madrid yesterday. I excused myself from the journalist and made my way through the crowd, a strange mixture of emotions churning inside me, surprise, joy, anxiety, a fierce protectiveness of this new life I had built. And then I saw him, standing just inside the entrance, looking slightly out of place in his practical travel clothes among the fashion crowd, his familiar face lined with more wrinkles than I remembered, his eyes searching the room until they found mine. Dad, I said, reaching him. Ellie Bear, he replied, his voice breaking slightly. Look at you. We embraced, a long, tight hug that bridged the ocean between us, the months of separation, the family fractures that had sent me fleeing to this new continent, this new life. I'm sorry to surprise you like this, he said as we pulled apart. I wanted to let you know I was coming, but then I thought maybe it would be better to just be here. To see you in your element. How long have you been here? I asked, still processing his presence. Just since yesterday. I'm staying at a hotel near Retiro Park. I have 2 weeks before I need to head back. 2 weeks, I repeated, my mind racing ahead to all I could show him, all the conversations we could have, all the parts of my new life I could share. If that's okay, he added quickly. I don't want to impose. It's more than okay, I said, meaning it. It's perfect. Around us, the event continued, music playing, people networking, the buzz of a successful launch filling the converted warehouse. But in that moment, time seemed suspended, creating a private space for this unexpected reunion. I'm so proud of you, Ellie, my father said, gesturing to the room, to the designs visible on every wall, to the life I had created from the ashes of betrayal. So proud of who you've become. His words washed over me like a benediction, not Because I needed his approval, I had moved beyond that need in my months of independence, but because they acknowledged the journey itself. He wasn't asking me to come back or to forgive or to make things easier for anyone else. He was simply witnessing who I had become and offering his love without conditions. Later that night, after the event had wound down and the last guests had departed, I sat with my father at a late-night cafe near my apartment. He told me about his flight, his first impressions of Madrid, his hopes for our time together. I told him about the project, about Rivera, about the creative freedom I had found here. Neither of us mentioned my mother or Olivia directly, but their absence hung between us, not as a wound anymore, but as a fact, a reality we were both learning to navigate. "I've been thinking about retiring," he said as we finished our drinks. "Selling the house in Vermont, maybe finding something smaller." "Really?" I asked, surprised. The house had been in our family for generations. He nodded. "It's too big now, too full of echoes. And after seeing what you've done, building a new life from scratch, I've been wondering if I could do something similar. Not as dramatic, perhaps, but a change." I studied him across the table, this man who had been the steady presence throughout my childhood, who had taught me to fish and change tires and stand up for myself. I had always seen him as fixed, unchanging, a counterpoint to my mother's social ambitions and Olivia's dramatic needs. But here he was, contemplating his own transformation, inspired by mine. "Where would you go?" I asked. He smiled, a hint of the adventurous young man he must once have been shining through. "I'm not sure yet. That's part of the appeal, isn't it? The not knowing." I reached across the table and took his hand, rough, familiar, the hand that had steadied me when I was learning to ride a bike, that had waved goodbye when I left for college, that had pressed car keys into my palm the night I fled to the airport. "Yes," I said. "That's exactly the appeal." As we walked back to my apartment through the quiet Madrid streets, a gentle rain began to fall, glistening on the cobblestones and softening the city's edges. My father pulled an umbrella from his travel bag, always prepared, always thinking ahead, and held it over both of us. "Tomorrow," I said, "I'll show you my favorite parts of the city. The places tourists don't usually find." "I'd like that," he replied. "I want to see Madrid through your eyes." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of our steps synchronizing naturally. "You know," he said finally, "when you left that night, I was terrified. Not just for your safety, but that you might disappear completely. That the hurt was too deep for any kind of healing or connection." I considered this. There were moments when I thought about it, about cutting all ties, starting completely fresh. "But that's not really healing, is it? That's just another kind of running away." He nodded. "The hardest part is figuring out what to keep and what to leave behind." "I'm still working on that," I admitted. "Aren't we all?" he said, squeezing my shoulder. As we approached my building, I looked up at the windows of my apartment, dark now, waiting for my return. Not the home I had grown up in, not the life I had planned, but mine nonetheless. Built choice by choice, day by day, from the wreckage of what had come before. And standing beside me, sharing my umbrella against the Spanish rain, was proof that not everything had to be left behind. That some connections could be carried forward, transformed but not discarded, part of the bridge between who I had been and who I was becoming. "Welcome to Madrid, Dad," I said as I unlocked the building door. "Welcome to my new life." Having my father in Madrid transformed the city once again. Streets I had walked 100 times revealed new details when seen through his eyes. Cafes I frequented became novel experiences as I watched him sample churros con chocolate for the first time, his face lighting up with childlike delight at the rich, sweet flavors. "How did I live 70 years without knowing about these?" he asked, dipping another churro into the thick chocolate. I laughed, struck by how much younger he seemed away from Vermont, away from the weight of the family home and its complicated dynamics. Here, he was just David Mitchell, traveler, explorer, father, not the quiet counterbalance to my mother's social ambitions or the peacekeeper between warring daughters. We fell into an easy rhythm during his visit. Mornings, I would go to work at Rivera while he explored nearby museums or parks. Afternoons, I would leave early to join him for adventures further afield, day trips to Toledo's medieval streets, explorations of El Escorial's somber grandeur, wanderings through Madrid's hidden gardens and forgotten plazas. Evenings, we would cook together in my apartment or try new restaurants, talking for hours about everything and nothing, his garden plans, my design projects, books we'd read, changes we'd noticed in ourselves over the past year. What we didn't discuss, at least not directly, was my mother or Olivia. It wasn't avoidance exactly, it was more like creating a space where we could simply be ourselves without the gravitational pull of family roles and expectations. Until one evening, as we sat on my small balcony sharing a bottle of Rioja and watching the sunset paint Madrid's rooftops gold, he brought up the subject I had been both dreading and expecting. "Your mother wants to come visit," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Not with me, not now. But perhaps in the spring." I took a long sip of wine, letting the rich flavor ground me as I sorted through my immediate reactions: resistance, anxiety, a flash of the old anger. "What do you think about that?" I asked instead of answering directly. He smiled slightly, recognizing my deflection. "I think it's up to you, Ellie Bear. No one can force you to see her. Not anymore." "But what do you want?" I pressed. "You're caught in the middle of all this." He considered this, looking out over the city. "What I want is for my family to heal. Not to go back to how things were, that wasn't working for anyone, least of all you. But to find a new way forward where we can all be authentic with each other. Is that possible?" I asked, voicing the doubt that had lingered despite all my growth and healing. "I don't know," he admitted. "Your mother is, she's struggling with her own demons. Has been for years. The need for perfection, for control, for appearances. Losing you, your presence in her life, your willingness to smooth things over, it's forced her to confront some hard truths." I thought about Olivia's email, about her claims of growth and self-reflection. "People can say they've changed," I said. "But have they really?" "Sometimes," my father replied. "Sometimes not. The only way to know is to see for yourself." I didn't answer immediately, watching as the last rays of sun disappeared and the city lights began to twinkle against the deepening blue of evening. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I'm not promising anything." He nodded, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "That's all anyone can ask." Later that night, after my father had returned to his hotel, I sat alone on the balcony, replaying our conversation. The thought of seeing my mother again, of having her here, in this space I had created for myself, filled me with a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. There was anger still, yes. Resentment for the patterns she had enforced. The favoritism she had shown, the emotional labor she had demanded. But there was curiosity too. Had she really changed? Could she see me now, really see me, in a way she never had before? I pulled out my phone and, before I could overthink it, sent a text to Zoe: "My mother wants to visit Madrid. Am I crazy to even consider it?" Her response came quickly: "Not crazy. Brave maybe. Or masochistic. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." I smiled at her honesty. "What would you do?" "I'd set clear boundaries," she replied. "Time limits. Neutral meeting places. An escape plan. But I'd probably give her one chance to show me who she is now. One chance." It seemed both generous and terrifying. But wasn't that what I had wanted all along? Not to be written off, not to be taken for granted, but to be seen and valued on my own terms? The next morning, I woke early and went for a run. Through Retiro Park, hoping the physical exertion would clear my mind. The park was quiet at that hour, just a few other runners and elderly people practicing Tai Chi beneath the grand old trees. As I completed my second lap around the lake, a clarity began to emerge from the tangle of my thoughts. I didn't need to decide today whether to invite my mother to Madrid. I could take my time, observe how I felt as my father's visit continued, check in with myself about what I truly wanted, not what I thought I should want or what would make things easier for everyone else. This was the gift I had given myself. By leaving, the space to make choices based on my own needs rather than others' expectations. I didn't have to rush this decision. I could hold it lightly, letting it evolve as I continued to evolve. By the time I returned to my apartment, sweaty and breathing hard but mentally clearer, my father had arrived with fresh bread and fruit for breakfast. We ate on the balcony. Planning our day's adventures, the question of my mother's potential visit left unmentioned but not forgotten. The next 2 weeks with my father passed too quickly. We established favorite cafes, inside jokes, comfortable silences. We took a weekend trip to Segovia, marveling at the Roman aqueduct and feasting on the city's famous roast suckling pig. We visited Rivera Design House, where he charmed Patricia and the entire team with his genuine interest in our work. And, through it all, I watched him discover the same joy in reinvention that I had found, the liberation of being unknown, of writing your own story without the weight of others' expectations. I'm going to sell the house, he announced on his final night in Madrid. We were at a tiny restaurant in La Latina, sharing plates of patatas bravas and grilled octopus. As soon as I get back. I've already talked to a realtor. Are you sure? I asked, surprised by his decisiveness. That house has been in the family for generations. He nodded. That's part of the problem. Too much history, too many ghosts. I want something simpler, something that's just mine. Where will you go? I'm thinking about Portugal, actually, he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. The Algarve coast. I visited once, years before you were born, and never forgot it. The light there is extraordinary. I stared at him, this man I thought I knew so well, revealing new depths, new dreams. Portugal, I repeated. That's only a short flight from Madrid. I noticed that too, he said, smiling. A happy coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence, of course. It was a choice, a deliberate decision to prioritize our relationship, to build something new from the wreckage of what had come before. What about Mom? I asked. And Olivia? His expression sobered. They'll need to find their own paths, just as you have. Just as I'm trying to. I'll always care for your mother. But the life we built together hasn't been working for a long time. Maybe it never really did. I absorbed this, understanding for the first time that my parents' marriage had contained the same patterns of accommodation and erosion that I had experienced in my relationship with Richard. My father had been making himself smaller, quieter, more accommodating for decades, and like me, he had reached a breaking point. I think you'll love Portugal, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, he echoed, clinking his glass against mine. And to the courage they require. The morning my father left for the airport, I felt a pang of sadness that surprised me with its intensity. Not the desperate grief of our first separation, when I fled Vermont, but a gentler sorrow, the natural melancholy of saying goodbye to someone you love, knowing you'll see them again but missing them in the meantime. This isn't an ending, he said as we hugged outside the taxi. It's just a pause. I know, I said. Call me when you land in Boston. And you'll think about your mother's visit? He asked, not pushing, just reminding. I'll think about it, I promised. No decisions yet, but I'm open to the possibility. He nodded, satisfied. That's all anyone can ask. After he left, Madrid felt both emptier and more mine than ever before. I had shown him my world, shared my discoveries, created new memories in this place that had been my sanctuary. Now it felt less like an escape and more like a home, a place I had chosen, a life I was building deliberately rather than by default. Spring arrived in Madrid with an explosion of blossoms in Retiro Park and a renewed energy in the city's streets. At Rivera, we were riding the wave of success from the February fashion event, with new clients calling daily and industry publications featuring our work. Patricia called me into her office one sunny April morning, closing the door behind me, a rarity that immediately put me on alert. Is everything okay? I asked, sitting across from her desk. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. More than okay. We've been approached by Vogue to feature our work with Luisa Torres in their sustainability issue. They want to interview the creative team, specifically you. My heart raced. Vogue? Really? Really, she confirmed. They're particularly interested in your perspective as an American designer working in Spain, bringing different cultural influences to sustainable fashion. I sat back, processing this news. A year ago, this kind of recognition would have seemed impossible, a dream beyond reaching. Now it felt like a natural evolution of the path I had chosen when I boarded that plane to Barcelona. There's more, Patricia continued. The board has been discussing the company's future direction. As you know, I've been wanting to step back from day-to-day operations, focus more on strategic initiatives. I nodded, familiar with her long-term plans. We want to offer you the position of creative director, officially, permanently. Your work over these past months has exceeded all our expectations. You've brought a fresh vision that's exactly what Rivera needs to grow. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. This was more than a promotion, it was an affirmation of everything I had built since leaving Vermont. Not just a temporary escape or a holding pattern, but a genuine achievement, a recognition of my value separate from any family connections or personal relationships. I don't know what to say, I managed finally. Patricia laughed. Say yes? Obviously. Unless you're planning to leave us for some American fashion house now that you're becoming famous. No, I said quickly. I'm not going anywhere. Madrid is home now. The words felt right as I spoke them. Madrid was home, not because I was running from something, but because I had chosen it, built a life here, put down roots that were beginning to flourish. Then it's settled, Patricia said, standing to shake my hand formally. We'll announce it next week at the company meeting. I floated through the rest of the day, calling my father first with the news, then Jade, then my Barcelona writing group. Each conversation reinforced the reality of what was happening. This wasn't luck or a temporary reprieve. This was the life I had created through hard work, courage, and the willingness to begin again. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of champagne, watching as Madrid prepared for night, lights coming on in apartments across the way, people returning home from work, the rhythm of a city I had come to love. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, heard about Vogue and the promotion. So proud of you. Love, oh, Olivia. How had she heard? My father, probably, or perhaps industry news traveled faster than I realized. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar twist of complicated emotions her presence, even digital, always evoked. But something was different this time. The twist wasn't as painful, the emotions not as overwhelming. It was as if she occupied a different space. In my heart now, still important, still complex, but no longer central to my sense of self. I saved the message but didn't respond. Not out of anger or punishment, but because I didn't yet know what to say. If I was going to open that door, even slightly, I wanted it to be a conscious choice, not a reflexive response to her congratulations. The following week brought a flurry of activity, the official announcement of my promotion, preparations for the Vogue interview, new project proposals flowing in from clients impressed by our recent work. I threw myself into all of it, energized, rather than exhausted by the demands. It was during this busy period that I received an email from my mother. Unlike Olivia's brief text, this was a formal message, carefully composed. Dear Eleanor, your father tells me congratulations are in order. A promotion and a feature in Vogue. I always knew you had exceptional talent, though perhaps I didn't express that clearly enough. He also mentioned that you might be open to my visiting Madrid sometime this spring. I would very much like to see your life there, to understand the path you've chosen. I know things between us have been difficult. I know I've made mistakes. Patterns of behavior that hurt you, that made you feel less valued than you are. I'm working to understand those patterns better, to change them where I can. I don't expect forgiveness or even understanding. But I would like the chance to see you, to meet you as you are now, not as I've tried to shape you to be. If you're willing, I could come for a few days in May. If not, I understand. With love, Mom. I read the email 3 times, searching for the hidden agenda, the subtle manipulation, the expectation of accommodation that had characterized our relationship for so long. But it wasn't there, or if it was buried too deep for me to detect. Instead, I found something unexpected: humility. Not the false modesty my mother sometimes employed socially, but genuine recognition of her role in our fractured relationship. Not a complete transformation, that would be too much to expect, but a step, an opening, a possibility. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I forwarded the email to my father with a simple question: is this real? His reply came within the hour: as real as she's capable of right now. She's trying, Ellie. Not perfectly, but genuinely. I sat with that for several days, consulting with Emma during our weekly video call, discussing it with Jade over dinner, even mentioning it to Patricia when she noticed I seemed distracted. Family, Patricia said, shaking her head. It's never simple, is it? What are you afraid will happen if she visits? She asked, cutting to the heart of the matter with her usual directness. I considered the question. That I'll fall back into old patterns. That I'll start making myself smaller to accommodate her expectations. That I'll lose all this. I gestured around the office, but we both knew I meant more than that: the whole life I had built, the person I had become. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. Or perhaps you're afraid you'll discover she's actually changed, and then you'll have to reconsider everything you believe about her. About your relationship. I stared at her, struck by the insight. That's possible. Either way, she said, you're not the same person who left Vermont. Trust that. Trust that. Trust myself. Trust the strength I had built, the boundaries I had established, the self-knowledge I had gained. Trust that I could face my mother without being consumed by her expectations or diminished by her judgments. That evening, I finally replied to my mother's email. Mom, thank you for your message and your congratulations. May would work for a visit, perhaps the second week? Let me know your travel plans, and we can arrange the details. Madrid is beautiful in spring. Ellie, short, neutral, neither warm nor cold. An opening, not a promise. A possibility, not a commitment. The most I could offer right now, and perhaps more than I would have thought possible a year ago. Her response came. The next morning, equally measured, equally careful. She would come for 4 days in mid-May. She would stay at a hotel near Retiro Park, not far from my apartment but giving us both space. She looked forward to seeing Madrid through my eyes. As the date of her visit approached, I found myself oscillating between anxiety and a strange, cautious hope. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, rearranged furniture, bought fresh flowers, not to impress her, exactly, but to create a space where I felt secure, confident, at home. I made reservations at restaurants that showcased the best of Madrid's cuisine without being ostentatiously expensive or exclusive, places chosen for their food and atmosphere rather than their status or Instagram potential. I planned a loose itinerary that included Madrid's highlights but also left room for conversation, for simply being together without the buffer of tourist activities. And I talked endlessly with my support system, my father, now settled in a rental in Portugal while he looked for a permanent home. Jade, who understood family complexity better than most, the Barcelona writing group, who had witnessed my journey from the beginning, and Patricia, whose clear-eyed wisdom had become a touchstone. Remember, Patricia said the day before my mother's arrival, you're not that girl anymore, the one who makes herself invisible to make room for others. You're Ellie Mitchell, creative director of Rivera Design House, soon to be featured in Vogue. You've built this life brick by brick. No one can take it from you unless you let them. I carried those words with me to the airport the next day, standing in the arrivals area watching as passengers emerged from customs. And then, suddenly, there she was, my mother, Caroline Mitchell, looking both exactly as I remembered and somehow different. She was thinner, for one thing, her elegant clothes hanging a bit loose on her frame. Her hair, always perfectly colored and styled, showed streaks of natural gray at the temples. And her expression as she spotted me, a flash of uncertainty, before the composed smile, revealed a vulnerability I had rarely seen in her. Eleanor, she said as she reached me, hesitating before leaning in for a brief, awkward hug. Thank you for meeting me. Welcome to Madrid, Mom, I replied, taking one of her bags. How was your flight? We made small talk as we traveled. From the airport to her hotel, about the weather, about her connection in London, about the Spanish countryside she had glimpsed from the plane. Safe topics, neutral ground, both of us feeling our way forward with caution. It wasn't until she was checked in and we were sitting at a cafe near her hotel, the late afternoon sun warming the plaza around us, that we ventured into more significant territory. You look well, she said, studying me over her coffee cup. Happy. I am, I replied simply. I've built something good here. She nodded slowly. Your father told me about your promotion. Creative director at your age, it's remarkable. In the past, I might have deflected the compliment, minimized my achievement, made myself smaller to avoid triggering her competitive instincts or discomfort with my success. Instead, I simply said, thank you. I've worked hard for it. A flash of something, recognition? Respect? Crossed her face. Yes, she said. You always did work hard. I didn't always see that. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of her blindness to my efforts that she had ever offered. Not quite an apology, but an admission, a crack in the perfect facade she had maintained for so long. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.